Okay, today we're going to talk about a very important topic when it comes to writing paragraphs, and that is text evidence. So, we are going to go through what it is and why indeed you do need it when you're completing all this academic writing that you're working on. So, first off, what is text evidence? It's information that's coming from maybe a text, right? So when we think of text, we think of either a book or an article, but we can also think of text as movies or posters. So if you were to pull text evidence from a poster, you would describe the image that you're seeing, right? And that would be your text evidence. And text evidence can also be um, a real example from real life. Okay, so an example from your personal life, and almost you think of yourself or a different person as the text, and then pull an example from that. Okay, so when you think text evidence, just think example, specific example. Why do we need it? You need to strengthen your argument. You need to prove your point. Just by stating one sentence isn't really going to convince anyone of anything you're trying to share. So you definitely need text evidence to validate the point that you are trying to make. So two major ways to incorporate this. The first one is a direct quotation. So that is word for word from the text, word for word from the article, and you use quotation marks, right? Very important to do that, because if you use word for word and don't use quotation marks, that's plagiarism, which is illegal, which will give you a big 0 on your assignment, and you'll have to redo it. So we're not doing that. The other way you can do it is paraphrase. So this is a good one to do if you think about if you're using an example from a real event or a real conversation that you had with someone. Paraphrasing is often a good thing to do because you may not know exactly their word for word, and you wouldn't ever want to put quotations around something you didn't know for certain was what they said. So paraphrasing, you can kind of summarize what they said. You can also do this from a text, right? If I think about, many of you will be reading the Gilgamesh epic story, and you have to give examples as to why he's heroic. You might summarize something that he did and put it into your own words versus using specific text. And that would, again, be paraphrasing. So direct quotation and paraphrase. We've talked about this, paraphrasing, right? You use your own words, because again, if you use words from that article and you don't use quotation marks, then it's plagiarism. If you cannot put it into your own words, then don't. Use what was exactly there, what's exactly in front of you, put those quotations around it, right? Protect yourself from committing plagiarism. Here's kind of three examples of what a quotation, right, a direct quotation looks like versus paraphrasing versus plagiarism. So if we look up here at the top, without even really reading it, I can tell this is going to be a direct quotation because I see exclamation, or I see quotation marks, right? I also see the article being introduced, which helps to steer away from plagiarism, right? Because I know this is the source. Okay, this second example, there's no quotation mark, so likely it is paraphrasing. I'm sorry. And then the bottom one, plagiarism, the soil is becoming more dense and that is affecting the fish, right? Obviously, maybe someone pulled that right from an article versus explaining it as the other examples did. So I'll just pause here for a moment and let you read these examples for yourself and really think about if you can see a difference. So a main thing with paraphrasing too, you still introduce that source. If we look at that last example, there are no quotation marks, there is no source. That's definitely plagiarism. Okay, so source and quotations, or source and paraphrase, is what you want to go towards. When you're introducing a text evidence, you always want to let your reader know where it came from, right? So this could be the author, it could be the title of the work, it could be the person, it could be the poster, whatever it is, you want to introduce the text evidence. So according to US Weekly, according to PBR, radio, according to my mom, or whoever your source is, you want to let your reader know where it's coming from. And you maybe want to give them credentials, right? Which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And credentials are something that when we've talked about that ethos piece, right? That's how is someone believable? And if you were to take my advice about buying a vehicle versus so and so who is the owner and manager of the Ford dealership for the last 20 years told me, right? All of those things are giving that person credibility versus, Mrs. Thompson, my English teacher said I should buy a Ford truck, right? That's no credibility built. So you want to include in a positive phrase. That's a little grammar review for you, right? It's a phrase that usually comes after a noun and describes what it is, right? In terms of the sources you use, they need to be reliable. If it is something that is more of a narrative piece, you can use someone in your life. But if it's something that's more academic writing or argumentative writing, you're trying to persuade someone of something, then you want to use those unbiased, science-backed, data-backed resources, right? A lot of them ending in .gov, .edu. You want to know your facts. You got to get them straight. And you can help to do that by giving in a positive phrase or credibility of the sources. Okay, here's some examples, right? If we look at that first one, Joey Parsalone, that's a noun, right? It's a person. The senior editor of Us Weekly, right? That's at a positive phrase. It's building credibility. Now I know who this Joey person is, right? And I might be able to trust that he's a pretty good reporter. He's been in this for a while. He works at a big establishment, right? US Weekly. Looking at the second one, Billy Burke, that's the noun, right? The person again, a geologist. Okay, so lets me know his field of work, lets me know I probably can trust him when we're talking about, soil and whatever it might be. And then it says what he stated, and it also gives the name of an article. So I also know he contributed to a published piece of work, which again builds that ethos, builds that believability, that credibility. Okay. Do you need to introduce the source every time? If your information is coming from the same source, no, you don't have to build that credibility. We already know Billy Burke is a geologist. So later on, you can just say, referring back to Burke or according to Burke or Burke later said, right? We don't need to say it every time. Here's an example of that, right? In this first part of my paragraph, if you will, I used in a positive phrase to explain who Billy Burke was. I introduced the article title. I gave all that information. And then later I just simply refer back, right? Burke later said in his article. So it doesn't have to be as elaborate the second, third, fourth time. Okay. When we talk about a paragraph structure, which if you're unsure of how to write a good paragraph, I want you to see my other video on that. But this slide here shows you where this text evidence comes in a good paragraph, right? And often it is followed by your topic sentence. Okay, so you state what you're going to try to convince someone of, or you state your claim, then you give that example, and then you explain it. Then you give another example proving the same topic sentence, right? 2 examples, always better than 1. So you're giving 2 examples that prove the same thing. Okay. When it comes to explaining your text evidence, you want to act as if the reader hasn't read the article, doesn't know anything about it. Break that text evidence down for us first. Then you're going to connect it back and pretty much say, why did you use this, right? How does it prove that topic sentence? And that's going to bring it full circle. Okay, again, here I'm just going to stop for a moment, take a sec and read these couple of sentences and ask yourself what should be added to make this more effective. Okay, so in that first one, we don't know who Jonathan Clark is, right? You need to add that credibility. We might put in a positive phrase after his name, saying what his role is and maybe where you got this information. The second one, it tells us where we got the information, but we still don't know a ton about this Melinda Ross, so I would also add in a positive phrase to build her credibility. And of course, writing a full paragraph, you'd want to explain what these quotes meant. Okay. Here's an example of, when I talk about like how to explain the text evidence, right? So we have the example, the soil is becoming more dense. That's the text evidence. This quote means, right? So tell me, what does it mean when soil is becoming more dense? And then what does it prove? How does that prove your topic sentence? So the first part, again, acting as if the reader has never read the article that you read, and then explain why it supports that topic sentence. Okay? If you would like to try to fix some of these punctuation errors, go for it, press pause right now, and then you can check your answers here on the next slide, because the one thing I will tell you, my friends, you need to capitalize things. We need names capitalized, we need commas that separate positive phrases. This is academic work you are doing and you are capable of it. So this is a time where you can practice. So again, press pause and then check your answers in a sec. Hopefully you got some right. Okay. Lastly, here we're going to just quickly talk about how to formulate text evidence. If you're introducing a big text, okay, and this, let me back up a second. This, my friends, is if you want to get to that A-level writing, right? If you are someone that's wants to go on to secondary education or post-secondary education, right? You want to start to sort these things out. All else fails, simply underline or italicize a text, and that is kind of the go-to. So big text, they could be underlined or italicized. Smaller text, right, little articles, chapters in books, they can be italicized. So what's the common denominator there? Italicized. So italicize titles and you'll be good. But again, if you're wanting to get to that A-level work, it might be good to know the difference between kind of that big text and smaller text and how it should be formatted. And then, as always, at the end of your essay, you want a full citation, author name, article, publication date, where you found it, all of those things. You can easily look up MLA formatting online. Okay. You want to be sure if you got your information from a movie that you quote that as well, right? That is a text, that is a source. It needs to be identified as such. So this was just a quick mini lesson on what text evidence is, how to incorporate it. Feel free to bounce through this video back and forth whenever you need to incorporate it, to remember what that a positive phrase is, remember where to put quotation marks, whatever it is. Use this video to help you guide there and stay away from plagiarism. All right, we'll talk to you soon. As always, reach out with any questions.